in John 8, the Lord said, I am the light of the world, walk in the light. And he was speaking to the people at Capernaum after he'd come back across the Galilee lake from feeding the 5,000. And this way he came back to Capernaum, met with a bunch of people, and he told them, I've done all these things, you still don't believe. That's when he told them, I'm the light, walk in the light. So, pretty good counsel for everybody.
Yeah.
There's a lot of darkness in the world, and it doesn't have anything to do with lack of sunlight. It has a lot to do with lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Proverbs for the day says, get understanding. Everything you get understanding. That's the thing. Wisdom.
Wisdom and understanding.
Yeah.
Knowledge. Yeah.
You can get everything else, but if you don't get wisdom and understanding, you haven't got anything.
Yeah, I'm focusing on 1 Corinthians 2. I've been reading it for every day for a week or two, and so good. It's the one about not the wisdom of the world, but what comes by the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. God has not chosen the wise thing, He's chosen the foolish thing to confound the wise.
Well, it's funny that you think about knowledge, knowledge doesn't really, it brings you some information, but you have to have the wisdom to understand it.
Yeah.
So just pure knowledge can take you totally in the wrong direction.
Oh boy, that's so true.
I mean, that's what people want. They want knowledge. It's the secret mysteries or whatever they want to call it.
You a little upstairs heat here. Is that too much for you?
No, that's fine.
Well, the politics and the media of the world are showing us what the world's concept of knowledge and understanding is. It's utter nonsense.
Well, not only that it shows the knowledge, but the technology that man's devised and how crooked and evil it can be.
Well, the Lord says the wisdom of the world is foolishness to God.
Mm-hmm.
So what the world calls wisdom is really not wisdom, it's foolishness. And people come up with all this stuff and they think they're so smart, but they can't understand anything.
I think I've told y'all this before, but it's made such an impression. I want to tell it again. But I saw an interview with a guy who was he's kind of in charge of an invention lab down there, kind of in Seattle, kind of an extension of the programming world, the software people.
Is it like R&D?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like that. And, for the first few minutes of the interview, he was there for about an hour. And for the first few minutes, you're like, wow, this guy's done a lot of things. He's pretty smart. Mm-hmm. And then he started talking about the invention lab. And, the guy interviewing was a businessman. And he was like, well, tell me some of your ideas that, I want to know what you've done. And he started saying stuff like, well, I invented something that can change weather. And he was like, really? Tell me about that. He was like, oh yeah. He said, we got all these people dealing with problems that, aren't real big problems, but, he said, I've tackled things like stopping hurricanes. I can stop a hurricane.
Or create one.
And he was like, really? Tell me about that. And he basically said, yeah, all you got to do is put a bunch of tires in the Gulf of Mexico and sink them in the water, and it'll lower the temperature. I'm like, man, that guy's crazy. And then he started talking about all these vaccines, and what got to me was, you guys, like Mark, you're probably pretty close to an engineering mind. But like a true engineer, you guys probably known some from church and stuff. Like I knew some from church growing up, and man, they think differently than everybody else. and it's not exactly a human touch either.
No.
And that's the way this guy was. And he was talking about me and you and everybody in the world, you know, basically just being a big, huge computer experiment. When you change the variables, what happens? And I was thinking, man, these are the people that are talking about all this
One world
this
order
vaccine
and all this
stuff,
Yeah.
saying, you know, and you know, Mark, you could talk about it like it's some kind of a conspiracy theory, but those are real people with a lot of money behind them. You know, I mean, that's why he's. I mean, how many people have a job at an invention lab?
Yeah. Well, think about
you gotta have a lot of money behind you, like people like
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates is the one that comes to mind, because I don't know if the conspiracy is his mom was CIA. Here's this bright kid in college going nowhere, and the CIA gave him the technology to start computers to start off. And I don't know if that's true or not, but he's not that smart. You know, it's sort of like when you think about people like Edison.
Mm-hmm.
Edison had a bunch of. He was smart, but he had a bunch of smart people working for him. Most of those inventions were done in his laboratory by other, but he got credit for all of it. Like Tesla worked for him for a while.
Yeah.
And then he didn't like where he was going. He branched. He left. And then Westinghouse and him had a falling out of, you know what?
AC/DC.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's Bill Gates now. He why does he want to get involved in vaccines? He's not a doctor.
No, he's not a doctor.
But he owns vaccine companies, and because he saw there was money. If everybody in the world needs a vaccine, I want that.
I think my point of bringing it all up is not to foment conspiracy theories, but that there are people who think a certain way who have been elevated in their wealth and power, and they don't see humanity as human.
No.
They see us as
Commodities.
numbers and figures.
Commodities.
And they see society as a thing to be manipulated and
Yep.
controlled. And, you know, Mark, I'm saying Mark, Jim, because, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about the conspiracy, but it's not a conspiracy when it's a real person right there in front of you. And that's what this
actions.
interview did to me. I was like, man, that's a real guy, and he's got ideas that are kind of crazy, and he's got people with money backing him up, saying, "Hey, go for it." You know, that's what's so dangerous, and it's not stuff that helps the world. Now he thinks it helps the world because he's like, well, you know, if we bring these numbers down here and push these numbers up there, and you know, he thinks he's working with data. He's not working with data. He's working with human beings, and that's what's so wicked about it.
Well, that was the theory of the Nazis.
Yeah.
That half the people of the world are made to be slaves to the other half. You need to figure out who should be in control. And of course, in their Aryan nation idea that only the blue-eyed blondes should rule the world, everybody else is to be slaves. So
Hitler wasn't blue-eyed blonde.
I know, but he blamed the Jews for everything.
He wasn't even a pure race, I think.
He was partial Jew.
Yeah.
Well, of course, he's just the epitome of demonic spirits, deceiving people into thinking they're the big shots when they're really not. But
Yeah, they were using demonic things.
Of course they were. They were into all kinds
Occult
of
stuff.
idolatry of every kind. This thing called idolatry is more evil than people realize, and how dangerous it is.
You probably haven't seen this, Jim, but maybe Brett's at least heard about it. The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. You know what that's about, don't you?
Well,
That's a picture of what the one world order wants us to look like.
huh?
They want the elites to control, and they want there's already a government map that the United States is sectioned into 12 regions, and that's what they had. 12 regions in the movie. Each region had, a hierarchy, and they lived like serfs, almost like in the Dark Ages. All the technology was taken away, and they lived real meagerly. And then they would have this war, pit one team against another, and they had this
For special privileges.
well, for the elites, it was like they'd bet on it and stuff. It was for, and then if you won, you got to live like those elites, posh. Everything was. It was a whole different world, and they had like this energy dome over where they did their Hunger Games, and they used technology to manipulate it. But these guys were using bows and arrows and swords and, really low-tech type weapons. And if you just see that, that's what they want. Some people want to be in control instead of let God be in control.
Well, it's the demonic spirit
Yep.
trying to overthrow God. Uses people and gets people to think that way. They're really just joining. The word conspire, con means to be with something. Spire has to do with life, spirit.
Right.
So you're joining your spirit with someone else's. That's what a conspiracy is about. You're joining up with someone else to come up with a theory of what works. And so, of course, the demonic spirits operate in the conspiracy idea that they get others to join with them in their thinking. So when people do that, they don't realize that they're joining up with evil spirits.
I never thought. It's good to know the root words.
Yeah.
Like, think of contraption.
Yeah.
You're joining
Yeah.
a trap.
In Spanish, the word
Into-
con means with.
Yeah.
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 So with means to join together, or bring two things or more things together. Inspire has to do with the same root as inspiration or
Right.
being of the spirit. They call
In the
appointed,
spirit, inspire.
appointed top on top of a church building called a spire.
Right.
It's supposed to reach up to the Spirit of God is the idea. But conspire means to join with in spirit with someone else or somebody. So
What's that thing called? You would know, Brett. It's Goldberg's thing. You make like you roll a ball down, it does all this thing at
Rube
the end.
Goldberg.
Rube Goldberg
That-
contraption.
Yeah, Rube Goldberg.
I
That's a
remember those.
contraption if I
Yeah.
ever saw one.
They were cartoons brought out
Yeah.
during World War II.
Yeah.
They'd always have these strange contraptions when this thing falls
Yeah.
down and trips that
Yeah,
lever.
what is it called again?
Rube Goldberg.
Rube?
And,
Yeah, he
Rube.
was actually the cartoonist, wasn't
A
he,
guy
Jim?
named Rube Goldberg.
R-U-B?
Yeah, R-U-B-E.
Oh, okay.
Rube Goldberg, and he came up with these ideas that they were just funny little cartoons, and they were kind of a joke. But the idea that, the chicken crowed, and that caused the cat to jump over the thing, and it knocked the candle down. That
Yeah.
burned the string. It dropped something on the head
Yeah.
of the dog, and the
Yeah.
dog barked, and something else happened, and on it goes. And then finally, a Jeep falls off a cliff or something before it's over.
Yeah.
And so Rube Goldberg contraption represents some complicated system that makes things work. It was just a joke, but it kind of illustrated the foolishness of people.
Yeah.
Little silly things cause other things to happen.
What were you going to say about it, Mark?
It was when Jim was talking about con and joining, and then I thought of contraption,
Yeah,
and then I kept thinking of contraption, and then I was thinking of Rube Goldberg
yeah,
made
How
that's
everything's
the ultimate
connected.
contraption.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know how my mind followed that rabbit trail. It had nothing to do with anything else, just words.
Well, that's
the
a good
word
illustration
even the
too.
word contraption came to mean some kind of a machine that operates in some crazy way, and to refer to a vehicle as a contraption is kind of an insulting way.
Sure. A contraption is something that maybe is more put together, rudimentary, or
Makes a lot of noise and rattles and
Yeah.
bumps up and down, but it does not very not very
efficient,
practical.
or
Yeah.
It kind of matches what our conversation's doing, though, because you can have a lot of energies and contraptions that are going towards something that over mechanicking something for a minimal result, and that's what the wisdom of the world is. It's overthinking it and over calculating, over machining,
but they have another thing is where their jaw locks. So when they bite down,
Yeah.
and they can't like let go very well. It locks down. It gets locked somehow.
Yeah.
I just finished a couple of C.S. Lewis books that I never read.
Which ones?
I listened to them. Well, I've done the first 3 in the series now. So the first one is The Magician's Nephew. The second one is The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe. Thank you. I was getting cold. And the third one is A Horse and His Boy. And, there's he's so rich in his spiritual principles that he puts in there. And he doesn't directly talk about God, but everything's in relation to Aslan, which is, the big lion. But, man, it's so good. Like, the horse and his boy, the reason it's a horse and his boy is because the horse is in charge of the boy. And he was a big old war horse, and he could talk. And the boy was like a runaway slave.
Right.
Well, anyway, so it was about their relationship and the boy growing up and becoming a man and, a fighter in the war.
Right.
And eventually he was a prince,
Okay.
But one of the cool things I took away from it is, so there was a scene where the boy and his girl, his girlfriend, they were both on horses and they were both like running. They were running from their enemy. And then they heard this lion, or they heard a couple of lions in the bushes. And so they started like tearing off. And as it were, the lion grabbed on to the girl. It injured her, but she kept on the horse. And then, but the boy jumped off the horse, his horse, and went after the lion. But he didn't get it. But then he kept on going and, informed them about the enemy. So later on, Aslan, who's the type of Yeshua, he's talking with the boy. And he's telling the boy about his place in the world, and about how Aslan was watching over him and guiding him through life. And he said, well, what about my girlfriend? And he said, yeah, I was the one who injured her. And he was like, well, why did you do that? And he said, that's her story. I'm only telling you your story. And that really hit me because of how rich that is. Because a lot of times,
each of us has our own
story. And each of us have our own relation to the Lord. And the way he worded that, it requires a lot of grasping in your head, because there are some issues with that, because you want to know about why would you do that to her. But you find out in another part of the book why he did it to her, and it was completely her story. And
he probably did it to save her in a sense.
Yeah, well, yeah. He did it to let her know the damage she had caused others, and it created an humble heart in her, and basically the whole story and that whole scenario that I just told you guys, that whole scenario, Aslan coming in and doing something improved everybody's world.
Is that part of Narnia?
Yeah, it's the whole Narnia series.
Yeah.
And, you know, The Lion, the Witch, the Wardrobe is the most popular one. It's like where the Earth kids, you know, the kids in London jump into a wardrobe and end up in Narnia. But the other books all happen in Narnia. So this was a Narnia story.
What's the C.S. Lewis book? Something about the conversation with the devil or something?
Screw Tape Letters.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Uncle Screw Tape.
I have that book. I never read it.
It's been hard for me to read, but some people really like it. My favorite to listen
Is
to
it?
is The Great Divorce. It's fantastic.
I know, like, I never got into Narnia. Like Gabe, he read all those books. He's an avid reader. He's read everything.
How about that?
Just when he was a kid.
Really?
And he hasn't done it so much lately. Well, he doesn't live with us anymore, but...
Oh, yeah?
No, he's living down in Homer.
Oh.
Anyway, I never, I saw Narnia on TV, the movie, and I know that the lion was supposed to be Yeshua and all that, but I just never got... It was too fairy tale. When I see, it's sort of like The Hobbit. I couldn't get into the Hobbits thing either. Did he write that or someone else?
No.
That was Tolkien.
Tolkien wrote
Yeah.
that. But
They were buds.
Yeah, I know.
together in that group called what'd they call their little group?
Was it the Quislings?
No, the Inklings.
Inklings, yeah. I knew it was something ling.
Yeah, they were writers. They called themselves the Inklings.
Ink for writing, Inklings.
Inklings, yeah.
For some reason, it's too fairy tale-ish. I can't relate to the characters.
Well, it's a parable.
Yeah, I know, but I'm a visual guy. If I see a movie, I want to see something that I can understand more. I don't know how that works.
Well, Tolkien's story of the Hobbits was related to his experience in World War I with the war in World War I. The orcs in the Hobbit resembled the Nazi soldiers in the trench warfare and everything. The way they overwhelmed the British, and he was from South Africa. Tolkien was. He was an African, but
He's
African, like black?
No, he's not black. He's
okay.
He's actually English, but
South Africa. Okay,
came from South Africa.
All right.
And but he related the stories of the Hobbit were based on his experiences in World War I. So it's kind of the swarming of these evil empires coming over all of Europe and ultimately over the whole world, trying to trap the whole world under their dominion.
It reminds me of the Book of Revelation, how that was a prophetic book, but it was also a parable.
Yeah.
And, he was drawing pictures. Because if you come out and say, well, the Germans are still evil, and, you just can't do that sometimes. And
I
some
never
people
thought
won't
about
even,
the Germans of the Hobbits.
and some people won't listen to you if you say, and your relationship with God is going to be like this. A whole generation of people would have stopped listening to C.S. Lewis. But since it's a talking lion, people will listen. And they're going to get the truth whether they just think it's a story or not. And, by the grace of God, they'll start to understand the wisdom of God and not the wisdom of the
Gabe
world.
never got it. He just read it as science fiction stories, or not.
Well, the essence of the Hobbit is a picture of this Hobbit was very peaceful little man who lived in a very peaceful world. But there
Underground?
was evil.
Yeah.
He wasn't underground, but they
Oh.
lived in underground caves.
Yeah.
But the world was being overrun by these evil powers, and he didn't want any part of it. He wanted to remain in his little safe, comfortable
Yeah.
little area. And the wizard, who is represented by Gandalf, is a picture of this, like the Spirit of God coming and saying, "It's time for you to deal with these evil things." He didn't want to do it. He called it an adventure. And I don't want to go on any adventure, but he ends up doing it. And of course, his part in the adventure had a great deal of overcoming his evil powers. But
I sort of feel like that guy, don't want to be a part of the world sometimes. I
well,
want
it's
to
like
be
people who
separated
don't want to
from
get involved in the war. They want to live in their soft, comfortable little world.
Yeah.
And not get involved in all the evil. But the Lord says, "I put you in the world because you have to be there." And but He says, "I'll always be with you, so you're not alone." And so in the stories, the wizard is always there to support and protect the hobbit, even though if he weren't there, he'd be destroyed. So it's kind of a parable of that.
I always think of a wizard as more of an evil than
No,
God.
no.
Oh no, not
No,
in
no,
Gandalf's
he is
case.
the-
He's the
he is-
white.
He is the dominion that
The white
protects
witch,
and
the
guides.
white wizard.
Yeah, he's a white
He
wizard.
gives counsel and advice like the Spirit of God.
Mm.
That's what he's a picture of.
Yeah, and I heard somebody break it down like this not too long ago, and I thought it was valuable.
How many people get that? I never got it.
Got what?
The parable.
Oh,
I never.
Well, that's what a parable is.
Well, I know, but-
it's taught. Do you know where the word parable comes from? It comes from the word parabolos, and in Greek that means throwing a ball. So it's like you're throwing it out there, and if people take it, they'll take it, and if they get it, they'll get it on any level that they get it on. You know. So
The Proverbs begins by saying, "This is written
Mhm.
so that you can understand the parables and riddles of the
Yeah,
wise."
yeah,
The Lord is the wise.
I get that. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Well,
And
he
I
wants you to
understand
he
most of
wants
the
you to
parables in the
understand it.
Bible, but when I go to the Hobbit and all those Narnia things, I could never get that Yeshua's the lion. I mean,
well, pray for wisdom. You'll get it. Watch it
Yeah.
again and see what the Lord does with that.
Yeah.
it just was
Because it might be a great value to you coming at
Yeah.
the age that you're at, and
really.
knowing that that story's been there the whole time, and maybe it's just time for you to see it from a different perspective.
When the
now.
Apostle James wrote, "If you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. If you need the wisdom to understand something."
I'd rather read the Bible and get my wisdom from that instead of watch Narnia. I don't know. It just doesn't. I tried to look at the characters and saw how they represented and worked together, but it just like when I see a talking lion, it's like the Lion King. To me, it's cartoonish. It's not real. So I guess I don't take the message as wisdom. I just sort of see it as something fanciful.
You know what I see it as? I see the Bible and God and everything it represents. Like we've been talking about today, there's a
Yeah.
wisdom that comes from God.
Yes.
That's the real story. That's the only real story. And everything else is in relation to that story, including our lives, including our relationship to it. And so when we have a story, how does it fit into God's story? And, that's why I was telling you guys about that, that story that I told you guys about the lion and how he told them, this is your segment of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's her segment of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though they were all in the same scene, it was affecting the four of them in different ways. And that's how our lives
Our
are.
lives are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We interact, but we all have our own stories and our own position. Sometimes I look at the world like what Shakespeare says. It's just a stage, and we're actors in it, whatever. God has put each one of us here at this time in this place for a reason, because we would most likely seek Him. Out
Yeah.
of all the time that we could live in, we're living right now because of that. And so I always look at, okay, my story, how do I fit in with other people?
You know, when the
Around
Lord
me.
spoke to Peter, he made a statement that suggested this is how you're going to die, by crucifixion.
Uh-huh.
But then here comes the Apostle John, and Peter said, well, what about him?
Yeah.
And the Lord really said, what's that? That's not your business. If I want him to live forever, that's his story, not yours.
Yeah.
And for that reason, the Mormons today teach that John never died, that he's still living somewhere in the world. The Lord didn't say that he would. He said, if I wanted him to,
Yeah.
what's that got to do with you? You just follow me, is what he said. So the problem with Peter was,
That's John the Baptist?
no, not John, the
okay.
Apostle John.
All right.
Yeah.
Same guy that wrote the books.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the Lord was simply saying, you follow me and don't worry about what happens to somebody else. You just do what I want you to do. And it's easy to kind of want to pass the blame off to somebody else or make them equally responsible. And the Lord says, no, that's his life. That's not your business. You just listen to what I tell you.
It's just like the 4 apostles, right? The 4 books.
Yes.
Yeah.
You got the deity, you got the suffering servant, you got the kingdom, and what's the last
The
one?
humanity, the man.
Humanity, the man,
Yeah.
Luke. So it's like tells 4 different stories of the same thing,
Yeah.
but from different aspects,
Different
and they
angles.
all have their story is to share that story.
Yeah.
That was
Just
their
like-
story, is to
Yeah.
know the Lord and to share it from their perspective.
Just like us sitting here, we look at that building, we describe it, but if you were parked in the backyard, it
Yeah.
would look completely different.
Yeah,
So you'd be looking at the same building, but from a different direction.
yeah.
Or if you were driving up by the drive-in window, you'd have a totally different view.
Or
of it.
we're all here
around
at
the
the same
backyard,
view, and somebody's all inspired by all the lighting.
Yeah.
Somebody else would be inspired on the architecture. Somebody else would be inspired on something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
17 degrees? Oh,
17717.
Yeah. 17717.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna have to bring it to you, I guess, Monday. But I was looking at this thing called the MERU Foundation. I think I told you a little bit about it, but I got some printouts that are really cool. How it's kind of a different angle of all the stuff on the numbers that you've been teaching.
Yeah.
And just in short, the guy, Mark, you would probably think it's really cool because he spent like an hour with a bunch of physical models and he was connecting them to the Hebrew alphabet. And he wasn't doing it all crazy. He was saying,
Model.
This is
when you
what
say
I
model,
see.
What is a model?
a model, a physical model
Of what?
well, that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like different aspects of the Hebrew alphabet. And mostly he was in just Genesis 1:1. But what he was doing is like for instance, well, here let's take this for instance. You know that each of the Hebrew letters have a number correlation.
Yes.
And let's just take
One.
a picture for instance.
Take one. God is
How
one.
can you
There's
make a
one God.
picture out of numbers? We use like a television can turn it into pixels, and the pixels are represented by numbers, like a graph, like a XY coordinate graph. So if this pixel is black, then this one is positive, this one is negative, and you can make a black and white picture by that. And then if you add color to it, you know, you can get a colored picture out of it, and it's all with numbers. Understood?
So the model is a pixel?
Well, no.
Trying to
yeah,
figure
yeah.
out
So what I'm saying is there is a number correlation with the letters, and if you can have number correlation, then you can do something else with those numbers rather than just correlate them. So
I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean by correlate? What does that mean?
correlate putting in an order.
So like for instance,
You're talking words like pixel. I have no idea what you're talking
all right,
about.
take Genesis 1:1,
Yeah.
and you know you're reading from right to left,
Right.
and you get all the letters, and each of those letters have a number value. And like
and it
for
draws
instance,
a picture.
I can't remember how many letters are in the first verse. I think there's 20.
I think it's
27?
22, isn't it?
Is it 22?
I thought it was 20 in the beginning.
Just like the actual alphabet has 22.
Yeah.
So but some of them repeat, and see that's the point. When you string, let's say if you had each of the letters and put them on a string, like it, and put a bead on each four standing up for each letter, and you know, for whatever reason, you know, the correlation values of the letters and numbers. Let's say you made each of those
Color.
letters a different color.
Yeah.
When you take the string and wrap it around itself 7 times, all the colors on the string correlate. That, you know.
What do you mean by correlate? What is that?
They make a picture. Like if you put like the Genesis 1:1 in the beginning, right?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth.
Right.
And
if you
string
put
it
all
together.
that out and those letters corrugated to a color, you would stand back from that page and you'd see a picture.
Yeah, and like when you wrap that string around 7 times,
Yeah.
there's lines of color.
Okay.
It's like a rainbow,
Yeah.
and so.
Why do you have to wrap it
That's-
around? That's
Well, see, that's the thing. Who knows?
but that's his theory.
Well, he's got a lot of theories, but anyway, what I'm saying is one of the things I found most interesting, talking about models, you know, taking the theoretical and then bringing it into a physical,
Right.
is anyway that all of the letters can be made with the shape of a hand, and I thought that was really cool. Like, you know, that's a bait, that's a cough,
Yeah.
you know. So each of the letters have, you know, different hand signals that you can make, and he was making the point that even with the Hebrew words, when you do the hand combinations with some of the words, they were like a sign language.
I
Like
wonder if sign language has some Hebrew letters in it.
like if you did big around, how would you do that with your hands? Yeah, well, you can't do it because you're
like
injured.
this.
Yeah, you and when you do, when you spell the Hebrew word round with letters, you're doing this. You're doing the big around thing,
Oh.
and that's just an example. But like there were several of them. Anyway, MERU is the foundation. MERU.
MERU.
And that's also a word for the alphabet. Something related to the
Does
alphabet.
this come from Jews or who made this
Yeah,
up?
there's a guy, the MERU Foundation. He's a Jewish
Oh.
guy. But we gotta run, fellers.
You gotta go.
He
Yeah,
has
sure.
to go make coffee before nobody gets into work but him.
yeah. We got one of those.
You can make it just the way
Keurig
you
machine.
like it, right?
Yeah, we got one of those single cuppers.
Yeah, that's
so
what I did at home. Except I run it through twice to fill this one up.
Yeah, that cup I had here this morning was really good though.
What do you have, a
Best
Kaladi?
cup of coffee I had all week. No, just a regular cup of coffee.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sometimes I go to get the foo-foo coffee, but Man, anymore it's like $6, $5. It's like,
I never met a cup of coffee worth $5 or more.
yeah.
Not yet.
Well, they put milk and sugar in it. That's why it's so costly, and the profit.
Yeah.
I wonder what the profit is if you buy a bag of beans, coffee beans, then you got to roast them, and then you got to grind them, and then sell the coffee. Think of all the processes that goes through this.
Yeah, there's a lot
You got
of
the
them.
pickers, and then you got the growers that actually growing and pruning and taking care of the plants. It just seems like,
Pay for the air freight getting it here.
yeah.
Alicia's been reading about a bunch of farmers and stuff, and she showed me this one scene where, the people who are interested in growing all their own food,
Yeah.
well, he didn't grow his own coffee, but man, he got his beans green and he roasted it like he went through quite a process just to get a cup of coffee. And I was like, man, I hope it was worth it for him.
Yeah.
Because
I know.
he would go outside just like he was grilling, so he had some contraptions outside for, I
Roasting.
think it was basically a popcorn popper.
Okay.
And that's how he would roast it, like an old-fashioned 70s popcorn popper, how
Yeah.
you could plug it into the
Yeah,
wall.
yeah.
And it would put that little hot plate out there, and it would scrape a little metal knife around
Yeah, yeah.
to keep them active and rolling around.
Yeah, yeah.
And he would use something like that to roast them, and then he would take them straight into the house, grind them, and make a cup. And they had like a fancy, smusher like they got in there.
Mm-hmm. A press.
Espresso,
Yeah.
Espresso. Well, shalom, shalom. Love you guys.
Okay,
Okay.
well, have
Glad
a great
to-
day.
See ya.
Thanks for all that technology.
Okay, jolly long.
Yeah.
And the,
Remember the MERU Foundation.
I finally got your picture